Vampires. You know the tale? Sharp fangs, silk cape, the hiss in the dark. They're supposed to be fiction, safe, contained. But in 1985, Florida wrote a new chapter, not in a novel, not in a campfire story, in the police blotter. And the name that splashed across headlines, the vampire predator, sounds like folklore gone wrong, right? But nah, this wasn't Transylvania. This was Brevard County, palm trees, freeways 9 to 5. And the man at the center, he wasn't some count with a castle. He was an engineer with a security clearance, a husband, a father. He looked like your quiet neighbor next door. But sometimes the monster doesn't rise from a coffin. Sometimes he parks in your driveway. So here's what we're gonna do tonight. We're holding up a split mirror. One side, the facts, John Brennan Crutchley, what he did, what investigators found, what one young woman survived, told with care because respect is the only way. Other side, the myth, the old vampire panics in Eastern Europe, graveyards in Serbia, reports read by candlelight in Vienna, the rise of Dracula himself, stalking Victorian London. These two stories, they walk side by side. Sometimes they collide, sometimes they argue. But together they tell us something about fear, about the masks people wear, and about why we keep turning men into monsters, and monsters into men. You ready? Good. Let's step into the shadows. Let's meet a man who wanted to drain life itself, and let's meet the myths that taught us what to call him. See, before Florida ever gave us headlines with the word vampire, Europe was already losing its mind over the undead. Go back to 1725, little Serbian village of Kiseljevo. Folks swear a man named Petar Blagojevich died, then came back, creeping into homes, sucking the life out of neighbors. 9 people gone in days. The villagers freaked out, opened his grave. They swore his body looked fresh, blood on his lips. So they drove a stake through his heart, burned him up, and wrote it all down. That wasn't folklore. That was a real official report sent to Vienna. A government dispatch saying, "Yo, we've got a vampire problem." And guess what? That panic spread. Medveja, 1731, the case of Arnold Paoli. Dude was a soldier. Claimed in life he was attacked by a vampire. He dies, and suddenly, 30 more people die. They open his grave, same story. Body intact, blood at the mouth. Austrian military doctors filed a report called Visum et Repertum. That's Latin for seen and found. They wrote, cold as ice. We saw signs of vampirism. Now picture this, Europe, the Enlightenment, the age of science and reason. And yet generals and priests are staking corpses because villagers swear the dead are walking. So big that Empress Maria Theresa of Austria herself had to step in. She sent her physician, Gerard van Swieten. He looked at the bodies, checked the rumors, and said, "Nah, vampires aren't real. You're just misreading natural decay." His decree? No more exhumations, no more stakes, no more panics, but once fear's in the bloodstream, good luck pulling it out. You got scholars like Augustin Calmet, a Benedictine monk, writing treatises cataloging every vampire report. And you got whispers of disease explaining it. Rabies, maybe. Foaming at the mouth, biting, fear of water and sunlight. It fit just enough to sound plausible. So here's the punchline. Long before John Brennan Crutchley ever touched a syringe, Europe had already given us the blueprint. Strange deaths, pale victims, communities in chaos. And when you didn't understand it, when you couldn't explain it, you called it a vampire. Now hold that thought. A man drained of blood in 1725, a young woman nearly drained in 1985. History echoes, and tonight we'll let those echoes talk to each other. Let's leave the vampires of Eastern Europe behind. Now we step into a quiet Florida neighborhood in daylight. This is where John Brennan Crutchley perfected the art of the mask. Born October 1st, 1946 in West Virginia, at age 6, subjected to intense shame by his mother, she dressed him as a girl. That trauma stayed with him. He buried himself in electronics, university degrees, a career in defense engineering, security clearance, touching classified naval tech, weapons systems, military designs. He moved to the Space Coast, a suburban home. A clued-in neighbor might see. Tidy lawn, no drama. But inside, Crutchley's garage held pages of meticulous notes, men's sexual preferences, a list of women's names, a computer, or what passed as one in the 80s, lined with scraps of personal detail. He was organized, methodical, measured. In myth, vampires slip through shadows. Quiet gates, velvet cloaks. Crutchley slipped behind the smile of the promising engineer. And when the night came, the mask came off entirely. November 21st, 1985. Malabar, Florida, Thanksgiving weekend. Quiet streets. A young woman, 19-year-old Laura Murphy, is waiting for a ride. The man who stops? John Brennan Crutchley. A man with a calm voice, a respectable job, yet carrying something deeply wrong. He lies to her, says he needs a notebook at home for work. She trusts him enough to follow. Then the nightmare begins. Once inside, he binds her with heavy cord, chokes her with a ligature, strips her naked, secures her to the kitchen countertop, lights taped overhead, a video camera recording everything. The assault begins, but not even that is enough. Crutchley grabs surgical syringes, inserts one into her wrist, another into her arm. Slowly, precisely, he withdraws her blood, eventually draining her of 40 to 45% of her blood volume. Doctors would later say she should have died within 12 hours without help. As if that weren't monstrous enough, he drinks the blood. Before her. 3 times this happens. Assault, blood draining, forced to stay alive for the next round. Morning comes. He straps her into the bathtub and leaves, threatens that his brother will kill her if she tries escaping. But Laura Murphy isn't a character in a fairy tale or a vampire myth. When he's gone, she fights, works her way through the cuffed wiring, pushes out through a bathroom window, crawls, naked, bound, bloodless, to the roadside. Trucks pass, most don't stop, until one does. At the hospital, she's nearly a ghost, yet alive, because she refused to stay dead. That escape shattered Crutchley's world. The mask cracked. The vampire predator was exposed. In vampire stories, the predator bites, leaves the victim marked. Here, the bite was substituted with a syringe. The thirst wasn't myth, it was blood. Laura wasn't turned into legend. She took her life back. All right, we've walked through graveyards. We've walked down Florida cul-de-sacs. We've seen blood in myth and blood in syringes. But to really understand why the world called Crutchley a vampire, we got to talk about the stories that trained us to see vampires in the first place. So let's crack the spine of some old books. 1819, John Polidori, The Vampire. Now this wasn't some peasant digging up a grave. Nah, this was high society. Polidori takes the vampire out of the mud, dresses him up like a lord. Refined, elegant, dangerous. A gentleman who kills you with charm before he takes your blood. You can feel London's gas lamps flicker in those pages. And the world ate it up. 1872, Sheridan Le Fanu drops Carmilla. Now the vampire ain't just a stranger at your window. She's in your home, in your bed. A friend, an intimate, danger wrapped in affection, predation disguised as love. That's a rhythm we see again and again. Keane, 97. Bram Stoker steps in with Dracula, and let's be real, he locked the archetype. Transylvania castles, London fog, the cape, the accent, the whole kit. And right there in chapter 11, a line that cut across centuries. The blood is the life. Say it again. The blood is the life. Not just a phrase, not just poetry. That's the thesis of the vampire myth. Blood equals survival. Blood equals power. Now pause with me, because in Malabar, Florida, 1985, a 19-year-old lay strapped to a kitchen counter, watching her blood pulled into syringes, and the man holding the needle? He wasn't quoting Stoker, but he was living the same obsession. Blood is the life. Let's swing across the ocean. 1892, Exeter, Rhode Island, Mercy Brown. Tuberculosis killed her family one by one. Neighbors said, no, it's vampirism. They exhumed her body, cut her heart, burned it, fed the ashes to her brother as medicine. He still died, but the story lived. An American vampire panic, real as rent. And science? Science tried to step in. Doctors talked rabies, the biting, the foaming mouth, the fear of sunlight. Sure, it explains some cases, but myth doesn't want science. Myth wants theater, and vampires gave people the perfect stage. See the split? Books gave us control. Graveyard rituals gave us an outlet. But John Brennan Crutchley? He broke the frame. He didn't come from folklore. He came from suburbia. He didn't wear a cloak. He wore a security badge. And yet, when his crimes hit the news, the world didn't say engineer. They didn't say predator. They said vampire, because sometimes it's easier to dress evil in fangs than to face it barefaced. So next time you see Dracula in a movie, remember, he's not just Gothic theater. He's a reflection of fear that keeps evolving. From Polidori's Lord, to Le Fanu's Carmilla, to Stoker's Count, to Mercy Brown's Grave, to Crutchley's Kitchen Counter. The hunter wears many faces, but the rhythm is always the same. Blood is the life. Once Laura escaped, the cameras rolled, but not for her benefit. Law enforcement stepped in, turning lights out in Crutchley's house, tearing through the mask he built. The first search uncovered video equipment, index cards with names and sexual notes, necklaces and locks of hair. But inventory shifted between searches. Cards gone, necklaces vanished. That's not oversight. That's heeding the predator's code. Keep your trophies. Blur the trail. FBI profiler Robert Ressler stepped in. A man who defined what a serial killer looked like. To him, Crutchley wasn't just a one-night terror. He was organized, calculated, the real deal. Names started to rise from the shadows. Deborah Fitzjohn, 25, disappeared from Fairfax, Virginia in 1978. Crutchley lived with her. Her skeletal remains surfaced months later. Florida authorities found the DMV investigator's business card among Crutchley's possessions. Patty Lou Valansky, last seen hitchhiking in March 1985. Her photo ID was discovered in Crutchley's office. He said she demanded obnoxious things, and he kicked her out. Nancy K. Brown, 25, disappeared June 1983 in Cocoa Beach. Remains found March 1984. Cause, blow to the head. Cheryl Ann Windsor, 16, found floating near Merritt Island in 1984. Another identity, Diana Lee Casey, also linked via skeletal remains. Kimberly Ann Walker, 21, remains found January 1985. A second victim unknown. Crutchley's car matched witness description. Lynn K. DeSantis, 40, found bludgeoned in November 1985 after hitchhiking. Her last sighting was near Crutchley's neighborhood. A Brevard County Jane Doe remains discovered December 1985 near Crutchley's home. Skull reconstruction released decades later to solicit tips. In 1986, Crutchley pled guilty to kidnapping and sexual predatoring. He admitted draining blood, called it ritual. Judge wasn't fooled, gave him 25 years to life. 10 years later, 1996, he walked out early. 1 day of freedom. One. Then he failed a drug test. Marijuana. Florida's 3 strikes law slammed down. Life sentence. Back behind bars. In prison, he stayed quiet until March 30th, 2002. Guards found him dead. At first, suicide, then ruled autoerotic asphyxiation. That's how the so-called vampire predator ended. Alone. A predator who built a mask of respectability and died without anyone left to fear him. The vampire? Dead. But the monsters that legends conjured, they live on in how we remember and how we fear. Vampires gave us a language for fear. They were how old villages explained sudden death, how Victorians explained desire, how America explained disease. John Brennan Crutchley? He gave us no legend. He gave us pain. But the label stuck. Vampire predator. Because maybe it was easier to call him that, easier to believe he was something unreal than to face the truth. That monsters don't need fangs or folklore. They walk like men, smile like men, and sometimes live next door. But let's not leave the story with him. Let's leave it with Laura Murphy, 19, bound, weakened, half dead. She fought, she escaped, she lived. That's the real story worth telling. Not just blood lost, but life taken back. Stoker wrote, "The blood is the life." And tonight we say, life belongs to the living. And the rest is just myth. Thank you for listening. There will always be more tales to be told, so please remember to stay safe, treat each other well, and, if you could, like and subscribe.